Hello internet users, and welcome back to Unused Content, the amazingly named show that lets me play Pokemon and call it work. What you are watching right now is the second part of an episode discussing Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald version. If you haven't already seen the first, click the annotation on screen to be brought to it. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy the video. During the last part, I had brought up how RSE possesses some sprites that aren't seen anywhere in the game. Another one of these is apparently an early version of the Team Aqua Grunt sprite. Wait a second, wouldn't Team Aqua in general count as unused content for Ruby version? And vice versa for Sapphire and Team... I don't even care. For most of my life, I've always assumed that the order of the Pokemon in the Pokedex was the order that the Pokemon were created in. However, by taking a look at the index numbers assigned to each Pokemon, it is revealed that there are a few Pokemon that aren't listed in the same places as their National Dex order. One of the two biggest differences involves the Gardevoir family. In the final game, Ralts, Corellia, and Gardevoir are listed early on in the Pokedex, as the first form, Ralts, is able to be encountered in one of the first routes in the game. But from the index numbers assigned to them, it appears that they were originally meant as late-game Pokemon, being bunched next to Pokemon such as the Salamence and Metagross families. Perhaps even stranger, the Pokemon Chimecho is listed at the very end, even coming after the event legendaries Jirachi and Deoxys. This seems to imply that Chimecho was added into the game very late into development, which I really don't understand. I mean, it's Chimecho. It literally serves no other purpose than to be an extra thing to grab for the Pokedex. No offensive power, no defensive power, and it can only be found in one place in the entire game with an extremely low encounter rate. In fact, this Pokemon is so pointless, I wouldn't be surprised if the reason it's listed at the end here is because somebody actually forgot to program it into the game. I hate you, Chimecho. You are all that's wrong with the world. Something that is a series staple is that every Pokemon has their own cry. Within the sound files of RSE, though, we can find that there are actually two cries that are not associated with any Pokemon. From what I could gather, it doesn't appear that these unused cries ever found a use within any of the Pokemon introduced in future generations. It remains unknown whether these cries were simply scrapped early versions of two other cries, or if there were supposed to be two additional Pokemon planned. An even stranger sprite can be found in all three versions, though. This weird stretched sprite sheet is some kind of redesign of an existing sprite from another game that Pokemon developer Game Freak worked on called Mendel Palace. While the sprites for the bike animation at least make a little sense for being in the data, it's hard to say what these ones are doing there as well. In Ruby and Sapphire, the Moss Deep Gym has some very unique tiles to it for its puzzles. It appears, however, that this area went through some changes visually, as there is an early version of its tile set left over in the data. On a related note, there is also an image within the games that shows some early interface graphics. Most noticeably, the Pokemon party screen sprites seen here are mostly different than the ones used in the final game. And if you're wondering, the text on the bottom here says Fushigedane, which is the Japanese name of the Pokemon Bulbasaur. A feature that was exclusive to the Hoenn games was the ability to create your own secret base. One of the things the player could do with this was place furniture around. Well, as it turns out, there are some sort of unused furniture items to go along with it. What I'm referring to are the dolls of each of the Reggies. I say they're sort of unused because it technically is possible to obtain them legitimately, but it's pretty difficult to do. While they do exist in the data of all versions of the games in different regions, they were only meant to be obtained with a special e-reader card that was only distributed in Japan. The only way to access them on a non-Japanese cartridge would require you to follow the steps you see on screen here. And since they're nothing but aesthetic items, they're probably not worth the effort if you ask me. What we're going to cover next is what I think to be the most interesting piece of unused content I've covered so far in this show. A feature added in Generation 3 was that the player could collect ribbons for Pokemon. This was mainly used for the Pokemon Contest minigame, but also featured some ribbons for doing certain things, such as defeating the Elite Four or winning a certain amount of times in the Battle Tower. However, almost unbelievably, there exist 64 unobtainable ribbons within the game's data. Every single one of these was also programmed into Generation 4, having added newer descriptions for them, which you can see on the right side of the table here. By taking a look at the first bunch of them, you can tell by the names that there were clearly plans to distribute many of these ribbons at real-world tournament events for up to 3 years in the future from Ruby and Sapphire's initial release at the end of 2002 in Japan. Surprisingly enough, it's actually not even known if any of these ribbons were given out at any of these events. but it's kind of amazing to see that Game Freak thought this far ahead. Another peculiar set among the unused ribbons is the Pokemon Center ones. These were clearly meant to be distributed to players' cartridges among the real-life Pokemon Center store locations. However, obviously these plans never came to happen. The most interesting of the other ribbons, though, has to be the quote-unquote Tower ribbons. These ribbons were apparently meant to be awarded to the player's Pokemon for clearing the areas called the Darkness Tower, Red Tower, Black Iron Tower, and Final Tower. Even to this day, no such locations exist anywhere in any Pokemon game, making the origin story of these ribbons a complete mystery. It should be noted though that of these 64 ribbons, 2 of them would actually see a use 1 year later in the game Pokemon Colosseum. The 2 ribbons are the Ribbon for Clearing All Difficulties and 100 Straight Win Commemorative Ribbon. The first one is awarded to a Pokemon when it is purified from being a Shadow Pokemon, a game mechanic exclusive to Pokemon Colosseum and its sequel, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. The second is awarded to all Pokemon in the player's party when they complete the Mount Battle Challenge, which, as the name of the ribbon implies, requires the player to go through 100 straight battles and win. Did that once as a child, and I am never doing that again. When a Pokemon with these ribbons is sent from Colosseum to any of the Generation 3 games, they will have these ribbons viewable on the status screen. It's not known if when the developers were making Ruby and Sapphire that these 2 ribbons were always intended to be obtained from Colosseum, as it was likely not very far into development at the time. Next up, we have some leftover content related to weather effects seen in the game's overworld. Aside from some variants of the fog effect that is already seen in-game, there surprisingly exists an unused animation for snow. Aside from the deeper areas of Shoal Cave, there are no outdoor areas or routes that have snow or ice in them. It wouldn't be until years later in Generation 4 that we would properly see snowy areas and weather in the Pokemon games, but this unused effect implies that there are originally plans for us to see it much sooner. In fact, within the data, we can even see a list of unused trainer rousters. Among these is an unused trainer class known as Border. Taking a closer look, we can see that the majority of the unused trainers that are a part of this class have nothing but the Ice-type Pokemon, Speel. It's possible that Border refers to trainers that would be near the border to another region, one with a more colder climate. This could potentially be what this unused trainer class and snow effect may have been intended for, but of course, that's just all speculation. It's also worth taking notice that among these unassigned trainer rousters, there exists some extra Pokemon teams for the Team Aqua and Team Magma leaders and admins, suggesting that there may have been more encounters planned with the villainous teams than what there was in the final game. Also, for some reason, one of these Magma admin teams is set to use the sprite for the beauty trainers. I can only guess that this was supposed to be for Courtney or something. Next up, we have something that's a little weird, but cool. By hacking the game into calling upon moves that go beyond its list of valid moves, we can see that instead of displaying a name of a move, it will instead display the type of move. This is likely some kind of relic of what was used as a debugging tool by the developers, perhaps to test the type effectiveness and resistances where working properly on the new engine made for Ruby and Sapphire. Surprisingly, Pokemon Emerald version seems to contain the entire soundtrack to Fire Red and Leaf Green. Despite this, only a few of the tracks are ever actually used, the majority of which only appear in areas or encounters with Pokemon that require the player to attend real-life distribution events beforehand, in order to even access them, such as the islands where the players can capture Ho-Oh, Lugia, and Deoxys. Alright, now it's time to get to everyone's favorite part. It wouldn't be an unused content episode about Pokemon without hacking our way past those silly things called walls. Just like with the last 2 generations, there are some cool things to be found when we move and interact with things in areas we're never supposed to be in. The first thing I want to cover is this house in Sutopolis City. This absolutely bothered the crap out of me when I was a kid. Why in the heck is there a set of stairs there blocked off by trees? Unfortunately, even when hacking your way past the trees, there is no warp point assigned to the staircase, so nothing happens. From what I gather, this house is supposed to feature content that can only be accessed through the e-reader add-on, which by the time Pokemon Emerald came out, had already cemented itself in North America as a huge flop. So while the second floor of this house may have been used in the Japanese version, it's completely pointless in the English version with all e-reader functionality unavailable. But knowing that now just makes it even more confusing. If they had to move sprites around to prevent you from going inside, why didn't they just put a frickin' wall there? No, clearly it makes much more sense to block it off with random houseplants. Another thing I've always wanted to do as a kid was to go past the fence into the Pokemon daycare. Sadly, unlike the Pokemon Zoo in Generation 1, the Pokemon here don't even have placeholder text, and you're not able to interact with them. Well, the grass here works anyway. Well, that may have been a bit of a letdown, but I've got something to make up for it. While I was messing around with walking through walls, I found that the PCs act really weird when you interact with them from behind. Obviously, you're never supposed to be able to use PCs this way, so I can't really fault the developers for having them work this way. But now, we come to the single greatest piece of unused content in Pokemon history. Forget the battle with Professor Oak, forget the woman who was banished to the void. None of that compares to the legendary sight you are about to witness. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, Nurse Joy's backside. Do you think she'll think I'm creepy for recording this to put on the internet? Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. Sorry I couldn't get it out a little sooner here. So I am doing one more unused content video for Gen 3, the Fire Red and Leaf Green video. That will be the next one I'm working on. Hopefully I can get it out soon. In the meantime, while you wait for that, you can check out some of my other videos. Obviously, if you're watching this, you probably like Pokemon, so you can check out that video I made about 5 things in Pokemon that make no sense. Or, you know, you can go over to my Let's Play channel and watch me play a Moemon Nuzlocke or Mystery Dungeon with my brother. That's a whole lot of fun. Lots of fun indeed. But anyways, thank you for watching. As I record this, I'm just about to break 1,000 subscribers, and thank you very much. Really means a lot to me. I'm glad people are enjoying these videos. But anyways, I really gotta get I gotta get going now. I've been working on this video all freaking day. Anyways, thanks again, and see y'all later.